Welcome, welcome into the space. Lovely to see people arriving. Feel free to pop your camera on if you're able to do so. We are going to attempt to make today's session as interactive as possible, and it'd be lovely to have a sense of you here with us, as if you're here with us in person, but also appreciate some people might be multitasking at this time of the day, perhaps on the school run or trying to cook at the same time as listening into this, or yeah, so we realize, and sometimes at the end of a long day, if you've been on Zoom all day, the last thing you want is another Zoom call. So appreciate that too. So lovely to see lots of familiar faces here, as well as some new faces as well. So welcome to all of you. I'm just letting people in as they arrive, so bear with me as I do that. What I will do as well is usually we close the doors to these sessions to preserve confidentiality in this space. However, this session is a little different to some of our other sessions in that it's a panel discussion, and we are recording it so that those that aren't able to attend live can catch up afterwards and listen in. So if people are arriving a bit later today, I will most likely still allow them to join, which is slightly different to how we usually do things. So welcome everybody. My name is Jane Morris. I am the group lead for the Bath and Bristol UK ICF group. I'm based over near Bristol myself on the coast and have been involved with the group now for about a year and a half. I also am an associate board member for the UK ICF, and I've been coaching now for about 18 years. I offer supervision and mentoring and training with a specialism in burnout coaching. And this particular group has been something I've really loved being involved with, because when I inherited the group, there was a pattern of sessions that followed a format that I have stuck with and really enjoy the mix of different sessions that we offer. So we typically have a panel discussion like this one on 1 month, and then a workshop the next month, and then we'll have an MCC coaching demo the following month, and then on the 4th month we meet in person, alternating between Bath and Bristol. So our next in-person meetup is actually going to be in Bristol, and I can see Evie's with us today. Evie, if you give a little wave, is going to be hosting the April meetup group in Bristol, and I'll put some details about that in the chat for those of you who are local. But we also welcome people from all corners of the globe, so it would be lovely to know where you are all dialing in from today. Feel free to pop your location in the chat. You can give a general zoomed out location if you don't really want to disclose exactly where you are, but it'd be lovely to get an idea from all of you as to where in the world you might be dialing in from. So we've got people from as far away as Belgium, as nearby as North Wales, already sharing in the chat. It's lovely to see. So welcome to everybody as you settle into this space. And I'm joined today by 5 really fabulous panelists. I've been really blown away by all of the panelists who are joining today, all agreeing from the outset when I asked them and invited them to come and speak that they all said yes and are all here, which I've been really touched by, because you're about to meet 5 people who have very full schedules, very knowledgeable, very experienced, and have given up their time this afternoon to be with all of you and to impart some of their knowledge, some of their wisdom, and generally have a conversation and hang out together and get into the nitty-gritty of the topic for this evening, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And each individual is particularly passionate about this topic. So we want to make this something that you feel like you're kind of dropping in on a conversation with us that's relaxed and easeful and hopefully interesting, but also to include all of you as well. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. We're going to break at on the hour, so no matter what sort of time zone you're in, if you're in the UK, it'll be 5 o'clock-ish, so that you can go into breakout rooms in small groups and chat about the things that are being brought to life, and discuss where there's resonance, where there's things you disagree with or you've got a different perspective on, and then bring some of that back into the space as well. We do have questions that are sort of pre-prepared, but I'm not going to be following a script. So I'm kind of preparing to be ripping that up and throwing it to one side and seeing where things go, but it's equally there in the background supporting today's session. So if you see me glancing off camera or down to the page in front of me, it'll be because I'm looking at seeing have we covered all of the different aspects of this topic that I was proposing to you that we would be covering, those of you that have kind of been involved in the run up to today and seen some of the marketing that's been shared. So in terms of this topic, it's obviously a really important consideration for us in relation to our work as coaches. The world around us is so complex and really shaped by the systems that we live in, the histories that have played a part in who we are and how we interact in the world, our own lived experiences, and all of this impacts on each and every coaching relationship that we as coaches have. So the integration of considerations for DEIB and principles around that are really essential. And yet it's a conversation that is ever evolving and changing. And as coaches, we really, I think, need to become as aware as we can be about our biases, our privileges, so that we're not creating barriers in coaching relationships. We need to look at how systemic inequalities show up, not just in coaching, but in the systems that we are part of, and how we can be, as we become aware of those, how we can disrupt them and how we can challenge them, and then how we can create psychologically safe spaces for our clients, especially those who are from underrepresented and marginalized backgrounds, and explore how we can move beyond surface level DEIB initiatives and really foster meaningful, lasting change. So we're hoping to touch on multiple aspects of this topic this evening and think and consider how intersectionality, how language, how cultural nuances all influence on our coaching conversations and these kind of discussions that we're having this evening. So we really do hope that you're getting involved, that you'll actively engage. And if you're not able to join a breakout room, if you let me know, then I will keep you in a separate breakout room with people who are also not participating in the breakout room, so that when those of you that do go into the breakout room go in, you are really able to have rich conversations as well. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. So first up, we've got to my left, she might be somewhere else on your little Zoom corner. I've got Bernice Hewson. Bernice, would you mind introducing yourself, saying hi, and then I will rotate around the other speakers.
Yes, hi everyone. It's really lovely to be here. I can see some familiar faces, which is really nice. And I'm actually originally from Chippenham, so I feel like I'm well positioned in this chapter because Bath and Bristol were on my doorstep, even though I'm now in Buckinghamshire. So yeah, really lovely to be here. I'm the founder of Raising Racial Consciousness. So whilst I am a coach, I'm also a coach educator. So I work with coaches, with supervisors, and with coach training organizations to support them to consider what racial consciousness, what critical consciousness, what inclusion looks like with regards to coaching, and how that shows up in us as individuals, what it might mean for us in our coaching spaces, so how that works relationally, and also what it looks like at a systems perspective. So yeah, it's great to be here. I probably won't say any more, if that's all right, Jane, and hand over to others to do their intros.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Bernice. And we've also got Elaine de la Cruz with us this evening. Hi, Elaine.
Hi everyone. Again, like Bernice, really happy to be invited and to be here. It is a really important conversation to have and to keep on having, I think. So I'm hoping that today people will have takeaways to kind of put into their practice. You can see my name's Elaine de la Cruz. I am the co-founder of a DEI consultancy and education company called Project 23. Essentially, we help organizations to create equitable, diverse, inclusive cultures in the workplace. Project 23 also kind of spawned another organization that we have called Coaches of Color, which is that our mission is to help people in the workplace thrive, particularly those from marginalized ethnicities. And coaching is our method of doing that. I think our belief is that we've all experienced coaching. I became a coach in 2018 as part of my Project 23 work. And I soon realized the kind of absolute brilliant qualities that coaching can bring for people. And our mission really is to make sure that it isn't just for those who have previously had access to it, those from different privileges. So that means kind of rethinking outdated models, ensuring that there's equity in coaching spaces and equipping leaders, I guess, with the tools to create inclusive workplaces. So that's why I wanted to be part of this conversation today. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Really looking forward to having you here as well. And I'm just going in order of little Zoom pixels at the moment, okay? So, next we've got Aysha Tupman. Hi, Aysha.
Hi. That was a bit of a kind of tension game because I'm in a different order. So I was like, where's she going to go next? My name is Aysha. Hi, everybody. I currently work for Bloomberg, which is a big media, tech, financial services mashup. Very diverse, very vibrant company. I've only been there 9 weeks though. For 2 years previously to that, I ran my own coaching business, coaching, facilitating, and designing and delivering leadership development programs. And prior to that, I had 15 years in a financial services organization working across DEI, talent, leadership development, various different roles. I kind of started all this work around the time of the global financial crisis, so have been through lots of different iterations of what corporate life looks and feels like. And certainly at the beginning of my DEI career, it was all about primarily fixing the women and helping them be more like men so that they could get the promotions. And I'm very pleased to have been on the journey and the change in a lot of the corporate DEI work where we're more looking at fixing the system and what should be done in the system rather than how the individuals should be changing. So a bit of a mixed background, but DEI has been in my nature, in my DNA, since I was a very small child. Actually, we can get to that another time. But it's great to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really good to have you here, Aysha. And next I've got Sam Williams. Hi, Sam.
Afternoon all. Yeah, lovely to be here. So yeah, I'm Sam. I'm the founder of Seedspark, which is a solopreneur business really focusing on human-centered change and coaching to facilitate that. I'm also a chartered engineer, so I also work as an engineer. So the coaching side's a smaller part of my life than it used to be, but a very, very important part. My background is in engineering, but often the organizational end of engineering, so the systems space. And I'm really fascinated by that intersection where the individuals and the organizations smoosh together. So really interested in psychological safety, organizational change, belonging. My personal story is one of a woman in STEM who's also late diagnosis ADHD, thanks to the menopause for highlighting that to me. So really, my coaching journey has been on helping to raise self-awareness in myself in order to understand how my potential can support that collective aim, whilst also trying to maintain showing up just as I am instead of trying to fit in, which I probably did for the first 20 years of my existence in the workplace, probably a bit more, and the negative effects that can come from that. So yeah, so my kind of contribution today is a bit of a mixed bag too. I'm very passionate about how we contribute to the world, and that requires all of us to come and show up as we are. The world needs that diversity to deal with all the complex stuff that's going on, and how we enable that, how we create organizations to do that, and how we raise awareness in ourselves and others in order to support that is kind of the bit that really makes me tick. So yeah, happy to be here, happy to answer any questions that might come my way.
Thank you so much, Sam. Really good to have you here as well. And Kai-Nneka, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Jane, for the welcome. really excited to be here. Just hearing the introduction so far from the panel, again, really so much resonates with me, and it makes me excited about this discussion. So I am a leadership, resilience, and burnout consultant. And what that means is that I equip leaders and their teams the resilient skills they need to avoid work burnout in the workplace. And a lot of the work that I do does come from my personal experience. I suffered burnout as a leader when I worked in the transport industry. And the work that I do that includes DEI is, I remember when I was working in transport, my business partner, and it was one of the first times that consciously I was thinking about how different spaces impact the individual. And so the work that I do now, that is brought into play where you think about how environments impact on, whether it be women, people of color, people with disabilities, and their own resilience or ability to navigate stress in the workplace, where their experiences might bring more stress on them. So that's the work that I do, and I'm excited about the discussion we're about to have and contribute to this space. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Really great to have you here. And as I said, what an amazing panel we have with us this evening. So we thought before all of you joined with us when we were having our kind of pre-prep discussion, that we would kick off with defining, first of all, what is DEIB? So I'm going to open the floor to any of the panelists to unmute, and it'd be interesting, I think, just to get different perspectives on that as a starting point for our conversations this evening.
I don't mind going first, because often I think to talk about DEI, EDI, DEIB, D&I, whatever you want to call it, I think knowledge about language and alignment around language as a group is always important, because it's kind of the foundation of things. But having said that, I know that different people use different acronyms. For me, we could go into this for ages. You could have a whole session on this even, but diversity for me is about the makeup, the diversity within a group, who is here, and probably more importantly, who is not, who does not get, who doesn't have access to these spaces. And equity is about that access, who has the same opportunities to thrive, but really acknowledges that it's not a level playing field. There are barriers, there are challenges for different people within society, and as much as that might make us feel uncomfortable at times, it is the reality, and it's the lived reality for many people. And I think inclusion really is about, with that diversity mix, like inclusion is easy if we're all the same, but inclusion really is about within that vast differences that we all have. Inclusion is who's heard, valued, respected, who has a seat at the table and can influence what happens and has a say in what happens to them as well as others, rather than it just being about representation and the presence of diversity. I think the inclusion bit to me is about the ability to make a difference and to have a say, power and access to that. So, and then belonging, I think maybe that for me personally, I think it does kind of start to become really subjective, is about experience. So, you know, who feels safe? They talked about psychological safety, Jane, right? Like, who feels safe enough, perhaps in a coaching perspective, to feel like they can say the things that they want to say within a particular space, and air their thoughts, or just be free to think those thoughts that they have. So who feels safe enough to kind of show up in a way that's right for them.
Fabulous.
Can I build on that a bit, Elaine? Thank you so much, because I think that the four small letters, it's just so wide, isn't it? It's so all-encompassing, and we can have a tendency sometimes, I think, to get a bit stuck on what the letters are and what they mean and what we should be doing. So I think that your description, the way you articulated it all, is beautiful. And I'd say for me, belonging feels like an outcome. If we can get diversity, representation correct, if we can get that equity piece right, and if people feel included, if those things are seen, then belonging can be the outcome, right? We can't necessarily engineer that. I was looking back on some notes earlier when I was thinking about this session, and I attended a session with an amazing somatic coach called Stacey Haynes, who's worth looking up, Haynes, and she does a lot of work on systemic inequity and frameworks of power and things like that. And I wrote down something that she said, which was belonging is to love and have love returned. In whatever way you want to kind of conceptualize that and make that make sense in all the different environments in which we live and work, to love and have love returned is like such a basic human need, isn't it? And if the other things aren't satisfied, then that it's difficult to satisfy that.
Love that, Aysha. And I think for me, the bit always that interests me is that, and the DEIB stuff happens at multiple levels. So at the organizational level, it's that structure, it's that system that's created to enable that. But at the individual level, that's going on inside every individual person at the same time. So there's two lenses to this, and often we can get mixed up between the two. So, and I think, yeah, that belonging piece, if you don't belong to yourself, it's very difficult to have the courage to belong at work, even if the environment is set up to enable you to do that. So it always reminds me of that kind of individual and community bit. It's that feeling comfortable to stand alone in the environment, but also having that internal confidence because you feel comfortable in your own skin to do that. And there are things that get in the way of that, which are societal, which are environmental, as well as, you know, that. So we're hitting it at several levels, and I think that's what always fascinates me, is that it's this multi-layered. You can go in from the individual level and expand on it, and you can come in from the outside level and go in, and each way kind of brings different nuances to that statement. And I always love the Brené Brown quote on belonging, and I always get it wrong, so I just encourage you to go and read it. It's about being able to show up as you are, who you are in the workplace, and not feel like you have to be somebody else. So that fitting in is the opposite of fitting in. We're fitting in where you have to be like somebody else in order to get on. It's about being able to show up just as you are and still be able to be different and still be able to say your piece if you feel that you're at odds with what's being said. So that's that psychological safety piece. But yeah, the whole, you know, I'm an engineer by background, and from, you know, that kind of place, it's the beauty of all of those things coming together and recognizing that it all has value, and being able to hold those, you know, the narratives of other people's values that may not make sense to you. So it's about having the ability to hold more than one worldview at the same time in order to appreciate it. Because most of the time, if we can't do that, then it's impossible to appreciate difference as value. Instead of difference is often seen as a not a good thing. But it's when we can start to frame difference as valuable, then it seems to make sense to internally and on the outside.
And I just want to build on what you know, you said, Sam, about that whole matter of the difference. I think for me, I zone in on that piece about the inclusion. So really, people want to feel seen, heard, they want to feel valued. And part of that is how they are supported in the workplace to be able to thrive. And that's going to look different for each person because they're all on a different journey. So I think part of that is, how do we think about supporting people in the workplace in a way that's right for them, because there's no one size fits all. And I think that is an important part of the discussion when you think about DEIB, just making sure that we allow people to feel seen, people feel valued, and they also, it's also appreciated that they can and will be supported in a way that's right for them to be able to thrive in the workplace.
All really lovely contributions and comments, and I have very little to add, to be honest. Absolutely, Kai-Nneka, for me, it's about if we take a coaching scenario, each of our clients feeling seen, heard, and valued. I think perhaps the one kind of lens to add when we talk about DEIB is probably the least talked about aspect, or the least the aspect we're least comfortable with talking about, is race, I would say. So I think we're generally quite good now at talking about gender equality. We're quite comfortable with talking about neurodiversity. You know, there are lots of aspects of diversity that we have kind of built an understanding of and a literacy for. I think probably racial diversity and what that means and what inclusion looks like from the perspective of race and culture. I think we're less equipped to talk about, and quite often emotions around fear and shame really halt that conversation. So I think we are very well versed at discussing diversity and inclusion through some of those lenses, and probably need to do work in other places. And I think it's great today that we're holding this space to talk about DEIB in its widest sense. But I think all differences are not equal when it comes to being able to discuss them and understand how they operate and how they function. And they don't all operate in the same way as well, right? So it's also noticing and recognizing that.
Yeah,
I would add trans and gender identity to that list of areas in which we are possibly less confident in having the conversation as well, if I may, Bernice, because yeah, I do agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in this time. Particularly topical, yeah.
And so I'm wondering then, as a starting point in terms of where we begin our conversations and our explorations, what it is that perhaps gets in the way from these conversations even happening. So I know, especially in relation to race, for example, and hosting this panel tonight, that I felt like, who am I to host this panel, and how I might end up saying something that causes offense, or I'm not, I don't have the language to necessarily articulate myself in the way I might want to, and so just like really vulnerably and transparently and openly kind of putting it into the space. Like, I would imagine that the reason we're less equipped is often because we don't know how to bring ourselves into the space sometimes, for fear. You mentioned fear, Bernice, for fear of getting it wrong, for fear of being misunderstood, for fear of causing harm, perhaps even as well. And at the moment, we're talking kind of really macro in terms of this topic in its broadest sense. And my intention is, as the session moves on, we get further in terms of how do we then relate that to our practice as coaches, and what it means when we're bringing this in a micro sense in our individual lives. So just wondering if there's something more that maybe we can explore with that as we get into this topic.
I think we, as part of our work in the DEI space, we work a lot in terms of education, and fear is one thing, particularly in white spaces. Fear is one thing that will always come up. I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to offend. I don't want to hurt. I don't know what language to use. I do this as a job, and I have that same thought. I don't want to offend. I don't want to fear. My adrenaline, is visceral sometimes, particularly when you do mess up, when you do make a mistake or you misstep. I think back to when I first became a coach, and they were like, okay, as part of your training, you're going to do these hours for free. And I was like, what, you're going to unleash me onto people? And I was scared, and I had anxiety, and I didn't want, you're holding space for someone and they're sharing. So I assume most people resonates. For me, I carried on with my training. I understand about the importance of CPD and learning. This is a skill. And I think oh, I put a little thumbs up, which I didn't mean to there. Sorry. I apologize now if I do balloons, just as I'm talking about race and racism by accident with Zoom. I'm really sorry. But go back to, it's a skill, it's a knowledge acquisition. And who am I to be scared about stepping into a coaching space if I'm going to call myself a coach? And who am I to not understand systems of oppression, or the different lived experiences of people, or the systems that most people just tend to operate, that we all operate in day to day? So and have fear as a kind of barrier to that. I acknowledge definitely it is, but I do think perhaps reframing it as a skills acquisition, using the growth mindset that loads of coaches like to offer out to others, it's a good starting point. But I also think it's related to who coaching traditionally is for the most privileged, right? Because of the expense of who he even knows what coaching is. I remember I didn't know what coaching was when a friend said, "Oh, you should try coaching." I just blagged it and like pretended like I knew 10 years ago. But that's because it's relatively homogenous. There isn't enough diversity within the coaching world. And that's probably because of the access to coaching in the first place, because most people, I think, who become coaches have experienced it first in some shape or form. So I think there is about the cyclical nature of it. And so we do need to dismantle some of the ways or the kind of barriers to entry of coaching in the first place. Just a couple
I think I'll maybe add to that, Elaine. I think there is definitely a knowledge gap, and I think maybe if we just take a bit of a step back, I think it's fantastic we're all here as coaches and supervisors having this conversation, and it should be and needs to be membership bodies and coach training providers who are taking responsibility and accountability in this space. So I think absolutely we need to have these conversations, and absolutely we, as part of our role, as part of our positions of power and privilege and influence, can be talking to those membership bodies and talking to our coach training providers and asking for more. Because if you look at the Global Code of Ethics, for example, it outlines, and we all sign up to it, and all of our clients see that we sign up to it, say that, you know, we will do the work around bias and discrimination, and we will build our literacy, and we, you know, we won't do these things. But actually, if you really critique the training that we have, it really doesn't examine these systems of oppression and how they might show up within us, how they might show up in a coaching space. And so, you know, I think we can legitimately say, well, actually, I've invested a lot of money to become a qualified coach. And as part of that, I legitimately expect my coach training provider to equip me with some of these skills that I can hold coach spaces for all, you know, in its broadest sense. Now, that might say, you know, within that training, it might say, so there's, you know, I would recommend you perhaps do more here, and there's always CPD, you know, there's always more that we need to do. But at the moment, because there's such a silence in our training, quite often we don't even know the gap exists, and we find it hard to articulate what the gap is until something happens. You know, so something might, whether it's a world event, you know, whether it's race riots in the UK that make us pay attention to, oh God, you know, what should this mean for me as a coach? Or if it's somebody within a coaching session that might say, oh, I've had this experience at work today, and I feel like it's only happened because, you know, I'm a Black woman in the workplace, and if anyone else did this, and then as the coach, you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure how to hold this. I don't want to offend. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so we go back into our head, we lose flow in that moment, and the moment has been lost. And there's something about what's happening in that space between coach and client, and that trust being kind of broken down. So I think, and then what happens to close the circle is that coach may speak to a supervisor about it. The supervisor may or may not be able to hold that conversation, often not, because they often haven't, you know, done any training or work either. And or you might hold on to it, and you might feel quite ashamed about it. You might feel really concerned that you might have caused harm in that moment. And so you may not even feel able to talk about it. And so I think there's something here for me about kind of permission giving to people to say, like, we haven't done this work. Not only have we not done this work as coaches, we didn't do it at school. We haven't done it in workplaces. That the system of oppression is successful because it robs us of this literacy and this knowledge. So actually, rather than kind of take all of that responsibility on ourselves, which, you know, there is responsibility there, there's also responsibility on us as a profession. And so I think there's a real need for us to push those membership bodies and those training providers to say, we want more. Like, we want the skills, we want to be able to hold these spaces. I want to be able to ensure that all of my clients feel seen and heard and valued. And what's the work that I need to do to go and do that?
Yeah, I think that's lovely, Bernice. And it really reminds me that kind of that removing that shame and blame from the situation we find ourselves in. It's not our fault, and it is our responsibility to do something about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think beyond the fact that the work needs to be done in terms of the training and the education, where we are now, there's something about, we speak about holding, creating a safe space for clients, right? And there's something about holding that space for ourselves as well. So Jane, you mentioned, I, don't know everything, and it's that vulnerability. So allowing yourself to come in with this sense of, what's my intention here? I'm here to help this client. I'm here to support this client. So there's something about listening and being able to understand in that moment what the client needs, because it's not about us giving them advice, but being curious enough to understand if they have expressed, today was hard because, and I feel it was because of my race. Being curious to ask the questions. So there's that reflection as well for the client in terms of, okay, so what's the next step for me? Because we're not the ones providing the solution. So I think there is that in the now for us to think about, how do we ensure that even though we've not had the training, how are we entering these sessions to create that safe space for the client, being curious enough to really understand what's happening. And if, for example, there's a particular objective around the coaching, or we're seeing things that there might be more cultural context, are we brave enough to ask that question, to be able to support you? Is there any cultural context or any other context that I might need to understand? Being able to ask those questions and then doing whatever research if we need to come to another session. But I think there is something there about being able to hold a space, create a space for the client, but being able to create that for yourself as well. Let's say space. So I might not get it right, but my intention here is to really support this client. And here's what I'm going to do with what I have.
Yeah, love that.
And thank you so much, because curiosity was exactly the word I kept coming back to, Kai-Nneka, and that what do I not know as a coach in this situation that is special and unique and so important in this person's dynamic? And that kind of like, the Gestalt stuff about bringing things into the field. What's coming into the room with us that I don't necessarily have a chance of knowing because it's not my frame of reference. And just going back to your original question, Jane, about worrying about getting things wrong, I think if we can take ourselves back to that square of nearly childlike curiosity about the amazing being that is in front of us, our client, what would we ask them? And like, how can we ask maybe different types of questions? So kind of the example that you just gave, and I might ask things like, what would you like me to know about you that I don't necessarily know? Or what question would you really love me to ask you that I haven't already asked you? So just giving kind of opportunities and opening doors for different things to come into the room that might not necessarily have had space in there before.
Yeah, I'm just noticing the kind of the zooming in and the zooming out again on the topic, and thinking back to what Bernice said about, again, these conversations and finding the language to have them, why it might be that they don't happen in the first instance, and especially thinking about I don't know the right word for it really. I was thinking about sort of in a business context, it would be managing up, right? When we're in a position that's not as senior in an organization, and we're trying to affect things in a positive sense, and we're offering up what needs to happen. Similarly, I think that's what's being kind of proposed in the profession. We need to be sending up the kind of communication channels that we need more of these conversations, and asking for inclusion to be considered, so that coaching is genuinely accessible to all, because it really is for the privileged few as it stands, quite simply because there's often a price barrier there first and foremost, if nothing else. So yeah, it's really making me think around all of that at that level, as much as the one-to-one scenarios. And I think a lot of the one-to-one scenarios, often how comfortable we feel in that context will be dependent on what interactions we have had with people who have walked a similar path, who've been influenced by similar experiences, where there is a difference between us in the role of the coach and the person in front of us as our client. And so just sort of wondering, you know, with everybody who's here listening to this dialogue so far, and we've kind of positioned different points of difference that somebody could be bringing into a coaching conversation because of their experiences of life, the intersectionality of various different things, perhaps. Like, where do you feel comfortable and competent if you are coaching someone who is who's had a different life experience than you? And where are there areas that you are yet to have met somebody where you actually have come close enough to start to understand their world? I'm sort of reflecting on my own life and the curiosity, sort of thinking on Aysha's use of that word, curiosity for other people, curiosity for other cultures, curiosity for different ways of approaching things that led me to live and work in many different places around the world and learn multiple languages and do different things that meant that I've moved in and out of different people's lives and different socioeconomic statuses. And I could feel quite comfortable in those environments with a client that's come from different environments where I have somehow had some kind of contact with their prior experience before being in the coaching room. But when it comes to a client where I really know nothing about the journey they've been on and the experience that they have had, I realize that is where that skill gap is, that knowledge gap, that feeling that I actually, as much as I want to empathize, there's so much I don't know about what that means for that person in front of me, that I recognize that's the place where the fear might come that might prevent me from really being able to meet them, from really being able to coach them in the same way that the fear was there to bring something on a macro side up and out, and let's have this conversation, when I've never created a conversation like this before, and that could have stopped me from even hosting this event, for example, today.
I'm just reflecting.
Go on, Sam, go on.
I was just thinking, as you're talking about, you know, that not knowing, and as humans, our kind of predisposition to need to understand everything in order to feel comfortable to do stuff. And the reality is that we never can. You know, we can do work, but we can never know everything that's going on inside another individual, and chances are they don't know everything that's going on for them either. And what it brings me back to is my kind of thinking, my learning around systems and complex systems, is the world is unpredictable and unknowable, but what we do know is that the quality of relationships and the quality of information, if you get those two things right, you give yourself a fighting chance for collaborating together. So the coaching space is a partnership. It's not a dynamic of where I need to know more than you to be able to support you in this space. It says, how can we together come up with something that neither one of us can do on our own? And for me, it comes back down to that quality of relationship and that quality of listening and curiosity and creating space and ease and allowing people, you know, to be able to show up just as they are, even if you don't, even when you don't know the answers. You know, we're not about fixing. As an engineer, that's quite a dichotomy, because I do a lot of fixing in my other life, but it's about that appreciating. And this is why coaching always fascinates me, because it uses a different part of our brain where we can actually just truly appreciate what's in front of us, as you know, as the ACT group say, that beautiful sunsets to be appreciated, not problems to be solved. And as soon as that fight flight response comes in, we go back to fix mode, or that urge to want to know and want to fix and want to feel certain. So it's about letting go of the knowing everything and becoming comfortable with the world is uncertain and unpredictable, and I can't know that. What I can do is build a quality of relationship that can support us doing whatever it is we do together next. And I think that's where the coaching space is such a remarkable space to do the work of DEIB, because it all comes down to that quality of relationship between the coach and the client and that space they create.
I think, well, thank you, Jane, for holding this space in spite of those fears, because I think what you're demonstrating is what we need more of in the world, which is people who are prepared to take small, courageous steps into spaces that we might not feel 100% comfortable in doing. So acts like this count for a lot, because it brings people together and it brings a dialogue that otherwise wouldn't be surfaced. I think also this idea of coaches not knowing, I love that, Sam. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's kind of meant to be one of the curiosity is meant to be the kind of cornerstone of coaching. And then when it comes to things like inclusion, it's like, but what do I need to know exactly? You know, it's like, hang on a minute, we're meant to be, you know, curious and able to hold these spaces. And actually, you know, I've had a few people who've come to me to say, I'd love to come and do your coach education program. I really want a tool to be inclusive, to be an inclusive coach. And, you know, the tool doesn't exist, by the way. So this kind of urge and need for tools to tell us that we're doing the right thing is a real distraction, and it's really unhelpful. I would say we do not need to understand how every other individual walks through the world. It's completely impossible and unachievable, and it will not happen. So if we set ourselves the goal of, you know, how do I coach? In fact, there is a book out there from 2012, and I think it's called Diversity in Coaching. And there's a chapter within each in the book. And one of them, for example, is how to coach Black British people. I mean, the idea that you could read a book chapter on how to coach people from different racial, ethnic backgrounds, and the fact it was written only in 2012, I just think is ludicrous. So first, you know, I think we need to put all of that in the bin and forget about that. I think we would be much better at focusing on really getting to know ourselves. And if we have a really grounded understanding of how we walk through the world, why we have the worldview that we have, what experiences have shaped us, then we already have a really good appreciation for people who haven't had that walk of life, you know, are going to be shaped differently, are going to see the world differently, are going to bring different things. So I really think that starting with the self and doing work around understanding our cultural identity, our racial identity, our ethnic identity, our, you know, every aspect of our identity, then it positions us really well to hold that space for a client. I think the other thing, if we can focus on ideas around critical reflexivity or critical consciousness, so by that I mean having an understanding of history and histories of power and economics and, you know, all of those other aspects that have shaped the world that we live in today. If we can really kind of build our knowledge and awareness of that, then we have a much better appreciation for the other, right? Because actually that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody other than ourselves and trying to make sense of them. Well, actually, they are shaped by all of these things happening in the world. And so, you know, there's a real power in kind of tuning into that rather than trying to kind of learn about the other. And I think the last thing I'd say on that is it can be quite easy. I think Aysha spoke at the top about the female leadership programs back in, you know, whenever it would have been 10 years ago. And we still see the same now. So we see leadership development programs for, they might be titled for BAME people or global majority people or ethnic minorities, you know, irrespective of the terminology, because I don't like a lot of it. Quite often these leadership programs are almost positioned as we're going to help you succeed, without naming the actual institutional barriers that are present within that organization. And, you know, the organization isn't necessarily being held to account to manage those. So I think when they work best is when you have an organization that's saying, right, we're going to do all of these things to remove these barriers, and we're going to support these individuals to succeed. But when you do one without the other, it kind of reinforces this deficit ideology of we must fix these individuals, you know, we must fix these women and how they can assimilate to men within organizations. It's very similar.
It makes me think of the whole lived experience that many people have, often because of the othering that they have encountered, where that will result in burnout, and how the onus is still on the individual, and there's not any consideration of actually systemically what needs to change in order for that to be different. Yeah, lots to consider there. I'm sorry, was somebody?
I was just going to add that, because I was sitting and thinking, there's like so many. I was sitting here thinking, actually, we could speak for hours about this, because it's a broad conversation. There's so many, like, there's lots of great minds here, and I don't mean just the panel. I'm sure everyone's tuning in, and I can see the chat. It's just not as simple as a one thing fixes everything, is it? It is a multifaceted skill, consistently and forever, and so there is definitely a piece about self. And like, I remember training, and I was taught that there's a position of neutrality, and I worked with Charmaine Roche, who you should look up if you don't know her, and there was such a profound conversation where, just using the language, where I acknowledged, yeah, I'm not neutral in my coaching position, and that's a position that I take in my coaching stance and in our organization. And what I mean by that, particularly here with regards to DEI, is that I have my biases. Neutrality doesn't exist, right? I have my biases. There are my own worldviews that shape like this. My practice means that I need to broaden out and understand more about the world. But I also most definitely need to understand about, to Bernice's point and everyone else's, actually, the self piece. But I need to understand that neutrality, and therefore the curiosity, isn't something I can. It feels like a bit of a luxury, because sometimes I just need to know that these systems do exist, and even if I don't ever talk about them with my coaching client, if someone who is from whatever marginalized groups, and if we're just talking about race as one of those things, I need to understand the systems that we all operate in, and particularly my client. And then maybe we don't even have to speak about it, because there's just an understanding in our thinking, and it's not lived experience, it's just the knowledge that this exists, that sexism exists, that classism exists in the workplace, in society. Then that surely informs my curiosity and sharpens my ability to ask the right questions or offer the particular accurate provocations. So for me, it is a both piece, as well as everything else that you probably need to learn in terms of the way that the human mind thinks and different sectors think. And then and that's what comes in the prep, doesn't it? As well as the supervision. And for me, I offer, everyone, including myself, consistently, who do I feel comfortable around? Who do I typically have easier conversations with, and offer those provocations? Who challenges my worldviews? And that's what I can be curious about, that, and follow that curiosity with acts of trying to work out why, perhaps, if I've grown up Catholic like I haven't had much lived experience, and my circle of influence hasn't always naturally included people from a Muslim faith, as an example. And if you think about mainstream media and the stories that are told about people from a Muslim faith, then perhaps there's more bias that's leaked into there, and stereotypes and tropes. And so it is up to me to educate myself and be aware that just because I haven't had a lived experience of breaking bread with people from Muslim faith, potentially, then it's up to me to understand where there might be stereotypes in my head, which would make me think this individual is pathologizing stuff, rather than actually that's just the system they operate in. Sorry if I got in a bit of a soapbox there, but it was really just sitting with me for a minute. I thought, no, we just need to cut through every now and then and just say it like it is.
I think the self bit's so important. And I find it really fascinating about the coaching I do is, as a neurodivergent person who has challenges around self-awareness, is that we assume people have the ability to notice this for themselves in a coaching space, and that's not necessarily always a given. So it's particularly when you're coaching someone who has challenges around their own self-awareness, actually the open-ended questions aren't always as accessible to helping them raise awareness. And that's our job. For me, that's the job. It's to be an awareness agent, to help provoke awareness in others so that they come up with their own solutions to their own problems. But the challenge around some of the where you've got challenges around self-awareness for your own sake is, as a neurodivergent coach, I have to kind of work really hard to understand my self-awareness to be able to be in a space to give it to help somebody else. But it does mean that I have to coach in a slightly different way for some of those clients. I have to provide a slightly different to have those conversations, a slightly different structure, which you wouldn't typically do with other people potentially. So and the coaching framework doesn't necessarily perhaps lend itself to that, but recognizing that equity, in order to help that person raise their own awareness, they need a different approach to raising awareness than somebody who doesn't have a challenge in that space. So that understanding that how we actually think as it, which is different, and it wouldn't occur to I've had these conversations again. It's really weird because how I think isn't how you think, and it seems obvious, but it really doesn't occur to me that you don't have that thing going on in your head at the same time I have it going on in mine.
Yes.
But we all do, right? It's we all live in that. So it's how do we they might not even know they need that. Yeah.
My mum always used to say, treat people like how you want to be treated, Elaine, right? And I come across lots of people who think that that's the right way to be. And I think building a point that exactly, like, we should be working with people or treating people in the way that they want to be treated or that they need to be treated. And I think your point then, connecting that to the coaching framework, that there shouldn't be a one fits all. And I think for me, it links to the practicalities of helping people to feel safe enough to self-identify who they are, the elements of their background, their identities, to help inform us of what their needs may be or what their experiences may be. And that can't be taboo, but also we need to acknowledge that not everyone feels safe to share straight away or ever.
May not have access to it. So one of the ways I do that is by literally demonstrating my challenges in the coaching space, to kind of just show that it's a thing. A lot of people mask and don't know they're masking, to give permission, going, it happens to me all the time. And when this happens, what comes up for me, this is, I then do this. And actually that creates a lot more awareness, because like, God, that happens to me too. I didn't even realize that. That's what that's about. And there's so much shame and trauma associated with some of these things that you don't know, that you choose not to access them out of all the pain that comes with that. So there's a real challenge there around the coaching therapy space, because as soon as you open that awareness box for some people who have not been into that space before, you're opening up a whole conversation into some delicate waters sometimes. So making sure, particularly for neurodivergent clients, I personally only coach people who have a therapist or currently have access to that support, because it's something that I think works, really important that they have that support in place ready to manage that unlocking when that awareness gets opened up, that they've got somewhere to go in order to manage that. And as a coach, not a therapist, that's not me, and we have that's a very clear distinction. But I can't, you have to create a system that's safe. There's no point in raising awareness if it's not safe to do that.
I think the masking piece you talk about there is really powerful, and I think if you look at it through the lens of race, that somebody's not, for example, going to walk into a coaching session and say, I'm carrying all of this racial trauma and it's presenting like this in the workplace. They are perhaps going to say, I don't feel good enough. I feel like I'm just, I feel like I don't really belong here. And so the being aware of the systems piece that Elaine was talking about before, the power of having that awareness is that you can perhaps open things up to say, well, what do you notice about belonging in that space? What other people belong? What do you notice about the culture within the organization? So you can broaden it up and you can ask bigger questions without making it all about the individual, perhaps in that moment. What do you think you need to do to have your voice heard in that space? How do you think you can be more resilient within that space? that might not be the thing that that individual needs. It might be an increasing of awareness, because they might not be aware that they are struggling within a certain space because of things that are beyond the things that they've considered as, you know, as rational kind of objective reasons, because they've spent a lifetime masking them and trying to assimilate, and it perhaps even results in burnout, right? So yeah,
stories we tell ourselves,
the story,
you know, to make that explicit, to get that out there, to be exposed and poked at and prodded and get compassionately curious about, is something I work a lot on in the coaching session. So when that little phrase has come off their tongue, oh, that's interesting, you know, what does that mean to you? Where did that come from? So it's that, you know, those self-limiting beliefs that are ingested through lifetimes of, you know, experience, and also societal expectations around us, that we don't take time to unpack. I think those are particularly useful kind of clues in the unraveling, unpicking, and raising of the awareness. So yeah, it's, for me, that's an important part to explore.
And I think just Bernice and Sam, what you just said about those type of questions and opening it up is so important, because you know, I saw a comment from Rita that says we must be mindful in the curiosity that we're not then putting the burden on the individual to educate us. And to be able to find that balance, is important that those questions are linking back to the purpose or the objective specifically for the client, and not just about our own awareness. And so even if we go out and educate ourselves about all these things, at the end of the day, the individual who is in front of us, it's important that we ask the questions that allow the opening of what's happening with them, because it might not apply to them. And again, it's funny because it could be that we bring a bias into the space where you're looking at an individual and said, oh, I've read about XYZ, but it's really coming back to being able to explore what's the objective of the client here, and using that kind of questioning then to be able to explore the things that help them find the solutions based on the context of what's happening. I think that's really, really important to be able to do.
Yeah, be able to share our observations without, you know, it feeling like it's a bias. To, you know, it's a curious question in service of you, you know, raising your awareness. Not so. I think that how we do that, how we frame our questions and present them not as facts but as just observations without any weight, in the service of a curious conversation, is really important. I often frame that up front, particularly with new clients. We have a quite a conversation actually about how that's going to happen, how we can respond to that, and if, you know, they're feeling comfortable to be able to in the moment go, you know, because a lot of people pleasers, you know, a lot of those show up and they want to do a good coaching session and don't often feel they can push back against some of the things that are the questions that are being raised. So part of the contracting for me is really coming up with some clear ways of working around how are we going to do that? How's that going to look? You know, what might give it away if you're not feeling comfortable? How do we have those difficult conversations safely in a coaching space? And just picking up on often the visual cues that they're then perhaps not feeling quite so comfortable answering that question is important.
I was going to say, Sam, as well, and it's about being like continuing to stay fully present with the client, right? So in all these examples that you're talking through there, and Rita, I loved your comment as well, it's when it changes to it being about us satisfying our curiosity, but by the very nature, then the focus isn't on the client anymore, it's on us in that space, and it's not about us, it's about the coaching client always.
Yeah, the question always has to be in the service of their raising their awareness, and that might be a curious question to provoke that, but it might not be a good one, and they're the judge of whether it's a good one or not.
So I'm going to come in and there's lots I could say back, but I'm going to hold off because I want to give all of you the opportunity to go into breakout rooms now and share with others what you processing at the moment? What are you reflecting on? I've put some prompts. These are invitations. You can have a discussion about whatever naturally, spontaneously arises in the space, of course. But I've asked you potentially to consider what's resonating with you so far, what's giving rise to new thinking, and where is your curiosity taking you, so that when we come back, there's maybe some questions that you want to share in the chat, things that we haven't yet covered that you've got an itch that maybe still needs scratching. Let's see where it goes. I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock. I've asked if anyone can't be camera on and participate in the breakout rooms, please to direct message me so that I can make sure that you go in a breakout room with those who also can't participate. So if you could take a moment to do that if you haven't yet, that would be great. So just bear with me. Okay.
Jane, sorry, I'm in my car at the moment and I don't have a chat function. So I couldn't direct message you, but I'm happy I can hear and I can speak. I just don't have my video on. So sorry for interjecting. It's not giving me options on my phone.
Very grateful, Tracy, and I'll leave you in a room in that case so that you can still chat. That's not a problem at all. Thank you. And I'm just scanning back to there was somebody else that had said they couldn't. Okay, got that person. Okay, we're all good. 2 rooms, 4. There we go. Okay, rooms should be open now for you, and we'll see you back in 10.
And breathe.
We managed to fill that, didn't we?
That was going really well.
Okay.
Just our own little breakout room there.
Welcome back in the ones that are in the waiting room.
I'm wondering like how many facilitators are on this call too, and who, when the Zoom like comes back, how many people want to like get involved and like, you know, start helping Jane. And you know, I just need to sit on my hands and not say anything.
Back, everybody. And yeah, we're curious what's coming back from your breakout rooms. Obviously, we won't have time to go to every single breakout room, but if there were maybe 3 different people that might like to contribute some reflections, we usually would have suggested that, of course, when you go into your breakout room, the conversations you have, please hold them with confidentiality for each other. So I missed saying that today, so apologies. I am making a presumption that as the majority of you are coaches, you brought that in of your own accord. So please only speak to what you're bringing back, your own reflections. Don't share any of what anybody else in the room shared with you. But feel free to unmute yourself. And if you'd prefer to share in the chat, please do that. Equally, if there's any questions coming back, please do share them in the chat, and we will do what we can to incorporate them in the last 10 minutes of our session.
I'll go.
Hi.
So what we had an interesting discussion, but one of the things that so much of what's been said has resonated. So first of all, a massive thanks to everyone on the panel. It's been absolutely brilliant. But one of the things that I brought to session was having previously worked for an organization that offers coaching, and the idea is to democratize coaching, looking at the panel or the associate pool. It really wasn't very diverse at all, and so there was this piece around, you know, how can we make coach training more accessible, so then, you know, if you're offering coaching to an organization and individuals have the opportunity to choose a coach, then they, you know, then there is more choice. So that was one of the things that came to me.
Thank you for sharing that. What great thinking. Thank you.
I'll offer something up. we had a really interesting discussion coming from different perspectives in terms of the type of ways in which, environments in which we coach. And one of the things that I came away with was how to, the fact that we don't all get the opportunity to work, we don't get to choose our clients. Sometimes our clients choose us, sometimes the place in which we work allocates clients to us. And so the idea that, either we might want to provide more coaching to a more diverse group of people, but we don't know how to do that, or that we are required to coach a group of people about whom we may know nothing about what differences they're bringing to a conversation at the start of a session. I think we found both aspects very challenging, and it's left me with a lot to think about, because I'm in the position where the people who come to me for coaching are people who look a lot like me in all sorts of ways. And I would love to work with a more diverse client base, but I don't know how to go about doing that.
Thank you, Lucy. Lots of food for thought there to take away. Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to say, there's something about the shared humanity piece though that I think is important. I think certainly from a lot of my clients, the ability to have, a sense of shared humanity around some of the topics, that chemistry around that can help create a really powerful coaching space. So it's not an either or. I don't think it's, I think it's an important part as well.
I can jump in. So I was really struck by what Bernice said about the fact that there is no quick fix tool kit or toolbox that you can refer to, and it takes time and it is an ongoing process. And I'd shared in my chat with the group about this quote that I love, which is that we must transform ourselves in order to transform the world. And I think coaches need to be constantly, I think, attentive to critical social consciousness, because I think if we're helping anyone think about how they continue to grow and progress in this world, they're going to be bumping up against issues of power dynamics, issues of inequality, in issues of societal imbalances. And if we're not attentive to that, I think we're not doing a good enough job, right, in helping them navigate it. So it's one of those invisible forces that I feel I continue to have to keep educating myself about. And I feel like every day I'm, discovering another invisible scaffolding, and it just never seems to end. But I think it's such a necessary process for us as coaches to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for talking to the fact that it's ongoing there, Chinru. I think quite often we think that we'll go on this training or we'll complete these tasks and then we'll be there and we'll be this inclusive coach and it's great, as opposed to it being a way of being. So it's not a doing, it's very much a way of being in the world. That actually, if we want to center inclusivity in our practice, it's a daily resistance to the things that happen around us. I think all of us are more tuned in probably to politics than we have been in a long time, right? Because it's right in front of us. It's in the news, it's in our social media, it's in our feeds every day. So there's a kind of real urgency to be conscious right now. But actually, that's no different from 6 months ago or 12 months ago. It might just be impacting us slightly more right now. So I think it's also paying attention to that. We don't need to wait for moments of these mass disturbance or mass events. Actually, this is an ongoing thing, and it's hard work, and it's but that's what being committed to the work looks like, right? It's an ongoing noticing, an ongoing being conscious, making conscious choices. Yeah, so thank you.
Any other thoughts or reflections or questions that anyone would like to offer into the space?
I was just going to add that it does feel like at the moment there are, extra bits of scaffolding going up for lots of people, and just that it's just such a massive opportunity to support the whole person at this point. So it feels like a huge responsibility. And I've also experienced those sort of elements of fear of getting it wrong, all that kind of thing. And I'm sure I'll continue to do so. But it's just such a massive opportunity to support people when, you know, they might be feeling vulnerable. But I guess the thing that I'm going to take away is, how can I ensure that I remain aware of my limited knowledge of somebody else's experience, but also help them, help create a relationship where they feel comfortable that they can bring as much of that as they want to be able to work on, a need to talk about, to move through whatever it is that they're bringing or they're trying to tackle. And definitely don't have the answers, but that's been a real sort of light bulb reflection that's come from today. So thank you very much to the group.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kelly, it can feel really overwhelming when you become aware of the enormity of the opportunity. And, you know, I think the trick is, and I do a lot of my, you know, my clients, is that we're not, yes, you can do all of those things, but not all at the same time and not all at once. And it's like, what's the next step? What's the next little step within the space and time and capacity you've got? So it's that intention, getting intention and paying attention and just moving in that direction without giving yourself the kind of stress of, I have to do it, you know, I have to be able to do all of these things all of a sudden. It's, you know, that's, you know, we're just trying to move the needle every step a little bit. You can't do it all at once, would be my response to that.
Thank you, Sam. I think there's something for us all to take away about this being a continued conversation, one that we'll never really be fully complete on within our own individual lifetimes, but I also feel like it's an incredibly powerful time for us all to be here and present to, I don't mean this conversation that we're in right now, this moment with each other, although it is obviously, we have only this present moment, but what an amazing time in history to be part of, where we are challenging things and contemplating things in a different way, and hopefully creating a different future for the generations that come. So thank you all for being here, for caring about showing up this evening, for your own learning, for your clients, for the work that you do in the world. Going to share in the chat, hopefully you'll see a little share from me that says CCEUs. Those of you that are members of the ICF and would like to gain some credits for attending this evening, if you click that link, you'll be taken to a form that you can complete, and your certificate will be sent to you. Our next meetup is in Bristol in person on the 14th of April. As I mentioned at the very beginning, Evie Arnold is hosting that very kindly for us, and the address is, if you follow that link, everything is there. And do feel free to join that LinkedIn group to stay across our monthly meets should you like to attend another one in the future. We'd be very glad to see you. And from me, a huge thank you to every single one of our panelists today. You've been phenomenal. From my perspective, wonderful conversation. I know I'm taking away a lot myself, and I hope you all are too. So thank you again for everyone for being here, and see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.